Chapter 48 of the Humbugs of the World. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Dodge. The Humbugs of the World by P.T. Barnum. Chapter 48. Modern Heathen Humbugs. A scale of superstition and religious beliefs of today, arranged from the lowest to the highest, would show many curious coincidences with another scale, which should trace the history of superstitions and religious beliefs backward in time toward the origin of man. Thus, for instance, the heathen humbugs, whether revolting or ridiculous, which I am to speak of in this chapter, are in full blast today, and they furnish perfect specimens of the beliefs which prevailed among the heathen of 4,000 and of 1,800 years ago, of the Chaldean Canaanite superstitions, and equally of those of the Romans under Augustus Caesar. The most dirty, vulgar, low, silly, and absurd of all the superstitions in the world are, as is natural, those of the darkest minded of all the heathen, who have any superstition at all. For, as if for the humiliation of our proud human nature, there are really some human beings who seem to have too little intellect even to rise to the height of a superstition. Such are the Andaman Islanders, who crawl on all fours, wear nothing but a plaster of mud to keep the mosquitoes off, eat bugs and grubs and ants, and turn their children out to shift for themselves as soon as the little wretches can learn to crawl and eat bugs. The lowest of superstitions are fetishism and obi, believed and practiced by Negro tribes, and remember this, even by their ignorant white mistresses in the West Indies and in the United States today. Yes, I know where Southern refugee secessionist women are living in and about New York City at this moment, who really believe in the Negro witchcraft called obi, practiced by the slaves. A fetish is anything not a living being, worshipped because supposed to be inhabited by some god. In some parts of Africa, the fetishes are a sort of guardian divinity, and there is one for each district, like a town constable, and sometimes one for each family. The fetish is any stone picked up in the street, a tree, a chip, a rag. It may be some stone or wooden image, an old pot, a knife, a feather. Before this precious divinity the poor darkies bow down and worship, and sometimes sacrifice a sheep or a rooster. Each more important fetish has a priest, and here is where the humbug comes in. This gentleman lives on the offerings made to the fetish, and he exploits his god, as a Frenchman would say, with great profit. Obi, or Obeah, is the name of the witchcraft of the Negro tribes, and the practitioner is termed an obi-man or obi-woman. They practice it at home in Africa, and carry it with them to continue it when they are made slaves in other lands. Obi is now practiced, as I already hinted, in Cuba and in the southern states, and is believed in by the more ignorant and foolish white people, as much as by their barbarous slaves. Obi is used only to injure, and the way to perform it upon your enemy is to hire the obi man or woman to concoct a charm, and then to hide this, or cause it to be hidden, in some place about the person or abode of the victim where he will find it. He is expected thereupon to fall ill, to wither and waste away, and so to die. Absurd as it may seem, this cursing business operates with a good deal of certainty on the poor Negroes, who fall sick instantly on finding the ball of obi, 2 or 3 inches in diameter, hidden in their bed, or in the roof, under the threshold, or in the earthen floor of their huts. These poor wretches become dejected, lose appetite, strengthen spirits, grow thin and ill, and really wither away and die. It is a curious fact, however, that if under these circumstances you can cause one of them to become converted to Christianity, or to become a Christian by profession, he becomes at once free from the witch's dominion and quickly recovers. The ball of Obi, or as it is called among the Brazilian Negroes, mandinga, may be made of various materials, always, I believe, including some which are disgusting or horrible. Leaves of trees and scraps of rag may be used, ashes, usually from bones or flesh of some kind, pieces of cat's bones and skulls, feathers, hair, earth, or clay, which ought to be from a grave, teeth of men and of snakes, alligators or other beasts, vegetable gum or other sticky stuff, human blood, pieces of eggshell, etc., etc. This mixture is curiously like that in the witch's cauldron in Macbeth, which, among other equally toothsome matters, contained frogs' toes, bats' wool, lizards' legs, owlets' wings, wolf's teeth, witch's mummy, Jew's liver, tiger's bowels, and lastly, as a sort of thickening to the gravy, baboon's blood. A Creole lady now at the North recently told a friend of mine that the Negroes can put some pieces of paper or powder or something or other in your shoes that will make you sick, or make you do anything they want. This poor foolish woman told this with a face full of awe and eyes wide open. Another lady known to me, long resident at the South, tells me that the belief in this sort of devilism is often found among the white people. The practices called Vaudoux or Voodoo are a sort of Obi, being, like that, an invoking of the aid of some god to do what the worshippers wish. The Voodoo humbug is quite prevalent in Cuba, Haiti, and other West India islands, where there are wild Negroes or where they are still imported from Africa. There is also a good deal of this sort of humbug among the slaves in New Orleans, and cases arising from it have recently quite often appeared in the police reports in the newspapers of that city. The Voodoo worshippers assemble secretly, with a kind of chief witch or mistress of ceremonies. There is a boiling cauldron of hell broth, a la Macbeth. The votaries dance naked around their soup. Amulets and charms are made and distributed. During a quarter of a century last past, some hundreds of these orgies have been broken up by the New Orleans police, and probably as many more have come off as per program. The voodoo processes are most frequently appealed to for the purposes of some unsuccessful or jealous lover, and the Creole ladies believe in voodooism as much as in Obi. In the West Indies the voodoo orgies are more savage than in this country. It is but a little while since in Haiti, under the energetic and sensible administration of President Giffard, 8 voodoo worshippers were regularly tried and executed for having murdered a young girl, the niece of 2 of them, by way of human sacrifice to the god. They tied the poor child tight, put her in a box called a humfort, fed her with some kind of stuff for 4 days, and then deliberately strangled her, beheaded her, flayed her, and cooked the head with yams, ate of the soup, and then performed a solemn dance and chant around an altar with the skull on it. The Caffres in southern Africa have a kind of humbug somewhat like the Obi men, who are known as rain-makers. These gentlemen furnish what blessing and cursing may be required for other purposes, but as that country is liable to tremendous droughts, their best business is to make rain. This they do by various prayers and ceremonies, of which the most important part is receiving a large fee in advance from the customer. The rain-making business, though very lucrative, is not without its disadvantages, for whenever Musalakatsi or Dingan or any other chief sets his rainmaker at work, and the rain was not forthcoming as per application, The indignant ruler caused an assegai or two to be stuck through the wizard, for the encouragement of the other wizards. This was not so unreasonable as it may seem, for if the man could not make rain when it was wanted, what was he good for? The ceremonies of the powwows or medicine men of the North American Indians are less brutal than the African ones. These soothsayers, like the Obi men, prepared charms for their customers, usually, however, not so much to destroy others as to protect the wearer. These charms consist of some trifling matters tied up in a small bag, the medicine bag, which is to be worn around the neck, and will, it is supposed, ensure the wearer the special help and protection of the Great Spirit. The powwows sometimes do a little in the cursing line. There is a funny story of a Puritan minister in the early times of New England, who coolly defied one of the most famous Indian magicians to play off his infernal artillery. A formal meeting was had, and the powwow rattled his traps, howled, danced, blew feathers, and vociferated jargon till he was perfectly exhausted, the old minister quietly looking at him all the time. The savage humbug was dumbfounded, but quickly recovering his presence of mind, saved his home reputation by explaining to the red gentleman in the breech-cloths and nose-rings that the Yankees ate so much salt that curses wouldn't take hold on him at all. The shamans or shahamans of Siberia follow a very similar business, but are not so much priestly humbugs as mere conjurers. The lamas or Buddhist leaders of Central and Southern Asia are, however, regular priests again, and may be said, with singular propriety, to run their machine on principles of thorough religious humbug, for they do really pray by a machine. They set up a little mill to go by water or wind, which turns a cylinder. On the cylinder is written a prayer, and every time the barrel goes round once, it counts, they say, for one prayer. It may be imagined how piety intensified in a freshet, or in a heavy gale of wind. And there is a ludicrous notion of economy, as well as a pitiable folly in the conception of profiting by such windy supplications, and of saving all one's times and thoughts for business, while the prayers rattle out by the hundred at home. Only imagine the pious fervor of one of these priests in a first-class Lowell mill, of say 100,000 spindles. Print a large edition of some good prayer, and paste a copy on each spindle, and the place would seem to him the very gate of a Buddhist heaven. He would feel sure of taking heaven by storm, with a sustained fire of 100,000 prayers every second. His first requisite for a prosperous church would be a good water power for the prayer mills. And yet, absurd as these prayer mills of the heathen really are, it may not be safe to bring them under unqualified condemnation. For who among us has not sometimes heard windy prayers, even in our Christian churches? Young clergymen are especially liable, and I might say, prone to this mockery. These, however, are but exceptions to the general Christian rule, viz., that the Omniscient careth only for heart service, and that before him all mere lip service or machine service is simply an abomination. A less innocent kind of praying is one of the religious humbugs of the bloody and cruel Sandwich Islands form of heathenism. Here a practice prevailed, and does yet, of paying money to a priest to pray your enemy to death. For cash in advance, this bargain could always be made, and so groveling was the spiritual cowardice of these poor savages, that, like the Negro victim of Obi, the man prayed at seldom failed to sicken as soon as he found out what was going on, and to waste away and die. This bit of heathen humbug, now in operation from so many distant portions of the earth, shows how radically similar is all heathenism. It shows, too, how mean, vulgar, filthy, and altogether vile is such religion as man, unassisted, contrives for himself. It shows again how sadly great is the proportion of the human race still remaining in this brutal darkness. And by contrast, it affords us great reason for thankfulness that we live in a land of better culture and happier hopes and practices. Chapter 48.